A movie-making mecca in Southern California for over 100 years is located right here in Culver City. A relatively young city, incorporated in 1917, this town will become known as the heart of Screenland and one of California's most haunted places. I'm Dana Amon. Welcome to Beyond Normal. During the heyday of the silent movie era, the notable Notorious could be seen hobnobbing in the cafes and nightclubs of this small town. Well-known names of that time, such as Charlie Chaplin, Mabel Normand, William Randolph Hearst, and Cecil B. DeMille, just to name a select few, were all here vying for their place in show business mega history, seeking affluence in an industry of entertainment that spun from the success of vaudeville and the Ziegfeld Follies. But unlike these predecessors, Hollywood was making still pictures move, thus opening theaters up to a much wider audience. It was the turn of the 20th century, and players like Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, and Samuel Goldwyn were on the cutting edge of a new technology, and they knew it. Iconic figures, ushering in the golden age of silent cinema, were establishing business networks and connections that not only made movie stars and blockbusters, but would bring personal and professional drama, scandal, enemies, and sometimes a life cut short. For those pioneers in the silent film business, creativity and a roll-the-dice energy was on fire. I mean, we're talking about the wild, wild west, roaring 20s style, and let's face it, nothing was going to slow these cowboys down. And in the middle of it all stood this beautiful southern mansion. Inspired by George Washington's Mount Vernon home, it was the first structure built in newly incorporated Culver City, and it was here that such films as Citizen Kane, King Kong, and A Star is Born would be made. And let's not forget that #1 box office hit, the granddaddy to all future blockbusters, David O. Selznick's Gone with the Wind. But well before that Civil War romance ever hit the big screen, there was this studio's founder, the wonder boy of silent films, Thomas Ince. Thomas Ince is credited as the first sole owner of a motion picture studio, and he had the genius to back it up. He wrote, produced, and starred in or directed over 800 silent films, and actually developed movie production methods that are still in use today. But unfortunately, despite Ince's power and genius, he would become one of Hollywood's early casualties, and a cloud of mystery would surround his death. On August 19, 1924, his sudden and unexpected death would end a party-faring voyage attended by several Hollywood elites and hosted by one of the most powerful men of the time, newspaper mogul William Randolph Hearst. Thomas's death would be ruled a heart attack brought on by stress and indigestion at the ripe old age of 43. Now, despite the curious circumstances that led to Thomas's passing, his body was never autopsied. In fact, it's said that Hearst himself hastened Ince's cremation, forever denying the questioning public an absolute explanation for the loss of one of the most prolific filmmakers of his time. And so, not unlike the films he produced, Thomas Ince's final scene would be cloaked in the fabric of silence. And I guess that brings us to why Beyond Normal is standing here in front of the most recognizable symbol of the Thomas Ince legacy. With the help of noted psychic medium Ellen Marron, we are about to attempt to communicate with the spirits that are said to haunt this studio, one of which is known as the Lady in White, and the other, the Wonder Boy himself, Thomas Ince. We'll be utilizing a classic tool of spirit communication tonight, one that Ellen has been reluctant to use on location in the past, and one that some may find objectionable. The answers we hope to get to our questions through the use of this tool may be considered controversial as well. But this is Hollywood land, so maybe it calls for a little controversy. Before we brought in Ellen and the team to investigate the mansion, our producers had arranged for us to meet with stage manager Michael Harris. Michael has been part of the Culver Studios family for several years, and has been present when some unexplainable events have taken place on the lot. A one-time skeptic, Mike has grown increasingly curious and was happy to share with us some stories of the most recent activity.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for letting us come here today. Things that have happened here in the past that you've heard about.
Well, when I first started here, I was security, and I used to work the graveyard shift. And so
Lucky you.
myself and many of my guards have experienced quite a few things going on around.
At 3 a.m.
At 3 a.m. Being that was pretty strange, she decided to go check a few offices. And when she went in, she checked the receivers and they were all off the hook and facing straight up.
No way.
She may have thought it was something technical. So she decided to place them back on the hook, leave the offices, lock them up, and check a few more down the hall away from the exit, on the opposite side of the exit. So she was getting ready to leave and all the phones started ringing again.
Oh my gosh.
As she was walking towards the exit, the lights, overhead lights, began to go off behind her. And so as she sped up, they started going off.
How long did she stay working here after that?
She said she would never do a patrol in here again. Yes. The original staircase, not much has changed in here, but this staircase has many incidences involving a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, late 20s, in a period white dress, young woman in the period dress, coming down the staircase. And so, yes.
So he saw in the reflection of the mirror?
In the reflection of the mirror.
And then when he looked over his shoulder, she wasn't there?
Well, first he spoke to her, he's asking her, how he can help her. He looks down and he notices that there's no feet. And she's hovering over the staircase.
Yes.
He calls the supervisor and says, he's out of here. Another area. Now this is very strange when you see the lady in the period dress in that window from the outside.
It's as though she's, where outside?
On the inside, not on the balcony. In that seat there, it seems pretty angry. Yes, like it doesn't want you there. In there, I get mad.
Okay.
I haven't experienced anything going through these other areas out in the hallways here in the mansion, but in there it's definitely male. Feels male to me. Very aggressive and.
I heard that there was some in one of the sound stages, like up in the.
The catwalks.
Yes, in the catwalks, exactly.
Those were some interesting occurrences. In fact, one of our grip guys was threatened by an entity where he actually seen a gentleman in a period suit, top hat. Sees a gentleman come out that says, what are you doing up here? So you're up here, you should argue with him, and says, you better get out of here. And he threatens him. And the guy walks off, but he walks through a wall. And so this guy gets very rattled. And he comes down and he speaks with his supervisor, and he described the gentleman to him. And he said, sounds familiar. So he went to security and they showed him some pictures. Thomas Ince, a few other people, and he recognized one of the guys in there. It was Thomas Ince.
Still hanging around.
He's hanging around.
After talking with Michael and Elizabeth, we were anxious to bring Ellen and our investigators to the mansion. Our group didn't have much time to prepare for this event, and were not familiar with the history of the studio, but recognized the iconic landmark. Well, yeah, the studio was founded by Thomas Ince in 1918.
So this studio?
Yeah, this studio, Culver Studios.
The studio is, they did Gone with the Wind here?
Yeah.
Is this a building that they used in Gone with the Wind?
No, this would have been the administration building at the time.
The whole time?
Hey, this is Mike Harris, everybody. Mike Harris is the stage manager on the lot.
Nice to meet you, Mike.
This is Ellen Marron, our psychic medium. And Mike has seen a lot of stuff happen in this lot, has heard about a lot of stuff that has happened on this lot, and he's going to kind of be our host for tonight's investigation.
You actually witnessed stuff happen yourself?
I've had some things happen to myself personally, and a lot of things.
So call the crowds in tonight, Mike. We want some action here, so let's invite them in. So I'm kind of curious as to what's special about this particular area that we're in now, as opposed to any other location on the.
Well, this is the oldest building.
Does anybody happen to know his background, how he actually got started in movie production? What kind of training did he have prior? Did he do like photography, or was
He had been an
just-
early actor at one time.
Okay.
Came out here in 1912, established a movie studio in Pacific Palisades that was called Inceville. It was actually considered the first modern movie studio because he had producers, he had directors, he didn't do everything, he delegated to other people. He pioneered the production line method of making motion pictures, which was then pretty much adopted by everyone else. So he was really a vanguard in early Hollywood, and had a lot of influence, became very powerful in early Hollywood. Like Mike said, found in this studio in 1918, and as Mike said, this mansion was the first building built here.
So what's your general sense, a feeling about the building and what might be in here? Is it good, bad, negative, neutral? What do you think? What is your impression?
There's some incidences where I think it's a little bit of both. In certain areas, and I'm going to show you.
Okay.
I'm definitely going to show you some of that.
So we asked Michael Harris if he would join us on the investigation. With his knowledge of its history and his association with the mansion, we hoped his presence would act as a trigger for activity.
And you feel it. You just like walk right into it right here.
This is where I've felt the most, but there's more on the third.
And fortunately, Michael was there to answer a lot of our team's questions as the evening got started.
I love this room.
Galley of a ship.
My whole body is tingling right now.
We have since taken out the table, but it had the...
This is where the elevator, the galley. So it's the story of Thomas's death. It all happened on a ship, on a yacht.
Well, the story goes that William Randolph Hearst, Luella Parsons, Marion Davies, Charlie Chaplin took Hearst's yacht from San Pedro, went down to San Diego. Ince was late and could not make the boat, so he actually met them up in San Diego like a day or two later. They then had a party on the boat in San Diego. Something happened on the boat that night, and that's the big mystery, because the story that was released was that Ince, I think, had some kind of stomach problem and was rushed to a hospital. He died 2 days later. But supposedly the LA Times reported that he was shot, and then that story very quickly disappeared and was not mentioned again. And a second story was that there was I believe, Japanese chauffeur of Charlie Chaplin's who said he saw Ince on a stretcher with blood coming out of his head. And so the rumors now go, apparently, is that there was some kind of triangle going on between Hearst, Chaplin, and Marion Davies. And perhaps Hearst caught Chaplin and Marion Davies in kind of an uncompromising position. Hearst then tried to shoot Charlie Chaplin, but somehow hit Thomas Ince. Was rushed to a hospital, died 2 days later, was very quickly cremated, and then supposedly Luella Parsons, who was present, was given a lifetime contract with Hearst at his newspaper, so she was set for life. Ince's widow came back, ran the studio for a while, and then she went to Europe, and more or less she was set for life also. So anyone who was there and present and knew what went on never had to worry about money.
And Charlie Chaplin claims that he was never on the ship. I wasn't there.
Chaplin claimed that he saw Ince like 2 weeks after the incident. He was still alive, which is impossible.
Correct.
Ince died 2 days later. So Chaplin's story makes no sense that he told. The mystery surrounding Thomas's death was indeed intriguing. Yet as the group explored the mansion further, Ellen continued to feel a strong pull to the main entry. Now, earlier that evening, Mike Harris had shared with the group the story of the lady in white whose spirit had been seen from time to time walking up and down the main stairs. Putting two and two together, we felt this location would be the appropriate place to begin the investigation.
Let's see what comes in. Let's see what comes in this evening.
I spent about 45 minutes in the main entry attempting to communicate with the lady in white. Aside from the odd light anomalies that cross into frame, similar to the one captured here, something else odd was going on with the ceiling lights in Ince's boardroom. One of our technical crew, manning the video monitors that night, pointed out what he saw happening with the lights as they appeared to be turning off and on by themselves. But as the team moved the investigation to Ince's suite, we basically dismissed what had happened as either a motion sensor malfunction or a loose wire at the light switch. What we noticed, however, when we reviewed the video, was that these ceiling lights went off and on several times, but only when we were outside the room. We also noticed that there were actually two separate light banks that had gone off, the perimeter bank and this circular bank in the center. This would imply that multiple switches were malfunctioning. To debunk this event, we sent a copy of these clips to Mike Harris, and Mike called in the studio's electricians to test the wiring, lights, and switches. They reported back that everything was properly installed and operating normally, and there were no motion sensors in the suite. So, is the only explanation that someone was flipping the lights on and off? We need to debunk that possibility as well. So what we're going to do here is first jump ahead in the evening to a time when one of our cameras was angled toward the light switches in question. Then replay this video to show those watching that no one was near those light switches. So, here we go. This clip was recorded at around 1 a.m. You can see here where Mike Harris is standing to comfortably reach the wall. The switches are about 2 feet from the door frame, and this over here is one of our static IR cameras. We'll reference back to this clip in a minute. Also, I want to point out the timestamps on our static IR cameras in Ince's suite. We'll verify these timestamps are correct using the grandfather clock that's down in the main entry. Now, we'll run the playback.
And I get a sense you're very good at what you do.
Were you born in California, or did you come to California to pursue a career?
At around 12:45 a.m., our cameraman here had gone ahead of the group to take stock footage. Notice where he is when the lights in the boardroom come on. So at this point, I want to go back to the light switch location in the boardroom. I find this clip very telling because of where the light switches are located on the wall. Notice our cameraman's infrared light crossing over the carpet. You can clearly see the shadow cast by the door frame here. This is evidence that our cameraman had not yet entered the room when the lights came on. And again, there are no motion sensors in the suite. So, with no electrical malfunctions and no one there to flip the switches, what's causing the lights to go off and on? While reviewing these clips, we did notice a couple strange light anomalies manifest in the boardroom. At around 12:10 a.m., a small orb manifests camera right and shoots up toward the ceiling. And then later, at around 2:30 a.m., toward the end of the investigation while the group was in the boat room, this anomaly manifests just below the ceiling lights. Now this shape here is much harder to see than most, so we'll attempt to highlight it. As the ceiling lights shut off, the orb manifests, camera left of center, and quickly darts toward the French doors, then changes direction just before completely disappearing. What we're seeing in these clips are certainly not reflections off insects, nor reflections off dust particles that float aimless through a room. Could it be that infrared cameras pick up the image of disembodied beings in the form of balls of energy? If life continues after death, there must be a form in which that life exists. If true, then what we may have witnessed here was an attempt by some form of intelligence we don't yet understand to communicate. I had mentioned in the introduction that Ellen would be using a classic form of spirit communication. What we're about to film is called by some a Ouija board session or a spirit board session. With the calmness that pervaded inside the mansion, and having the specific intent of communicating with either the spirit of Thomas Ince or the Lady in White, Ellen felt the environment was right for what would be her first seance of this kind during an investigation. During our review of the seance video, we did notice several other light anomalies, but in the interest of time we couldn't highlight each of them. There were a select few, however, we simply could not ignore. Notice what occurs here at the top of Eric's head. It seemed to us that what we were seeing was some type of energy leap out of Eric's head, then re-enter, like it jumped. The phenomenon got even stranger when we blew up the image to get a closer look. Now maybe we're victims of matrixing here, which is a human tendency to find familiar shapes and faces in backgrounds that don't truly exist. But when enhanced, the image looked remarkably similar to one of the photos we found of Thomas Ince. Here's the photo we found, which will line up and then overlay with the anomaly. Was this really Thomas Ince we captured? I don't know, but we did get this response from the RIM pod shortly after we recorded this anomaly.
That's crazy.
Are you Thomas Ince?
Another smaller anomaly was captured just as Ellen opened the seance. You can see it appear here next to the white candle, then it moves toward the board and appears to drop inside.
And then whatever your belief system is, we call upon those in the white light, and only those may work with us in a positive manner and not drain energy from our being.
We would later see a similar ball of light leave the board when Ellen closes the session. But for now, our main event, the seance. Due to some of the responses we received during this seance, those familiar with Thomas Ince's story may consider this session controversial. So I want to assure those watching that the questions asked were spontaneous and without any implications, and the answers you'll witness were not of our choosing. Again, while reviewing the video, we did recognize the increased frequency of light play just before the seance. I mentioned before that no windows were open in the suite and that the air conditioning was off. If what we're seeing here was dust, I have no explanation why it would be shooting up from the floor and in so many different directions.
And letting the planchette move about the board to each.
This event would be a new experience for me, and I was surprised how quickly we appeared to be in direct contact with something capable of responding, but then again, we did have a psychic medium on our side.
In the white light.
It was during this time that one of our IR cameras captured this small anomaly that appeared to enter Ellen's spirit board.
Thomas here.
Denny?
From my vantage point, we had made contact with something in that mansion, and it claimed to be the studio's founder, Thomas Ince.
Thomas, are you here with us? Yes or no? Is there someone else here with us? Is you...
Very good. Is there someone else?
What was that?
I don't know. I heard that too, though. Sound like this.
Like a whistle. Okay.
It says no.
All right. So, are you Thomas?
So this is Thomas.
Can you confirm with a yes, please?
Yes.
Welcome, Thomas. So, Thomas, do you know who the lady in white is? No. Have you seen her?
Yes.
Does she keep you company?
No.
Perhaps she came here. Did she come here after your time here?
Thomas, you built this studio, right?
Yes.
In the next series of questions, we delved into the mysteries surrounding Thomas's death.
And throw another question.
Thomas, did someone murder you? You got a guess?
Yes.
Can you tell us who it was? Can you spell his last name or their last name?
Maybe asking for the guilty party's name was a mistake because the planchette just kept circling or would stop in nondescript places on the board. Finally acknowledging that our who did it question would go unanswered, our static camera 3 captured a very strange light play in the room. Basically, there were 2 flares of light picked up in this clip.
You don't want to tell.
The first appears behind Eric, the second behind Mike Harris and Ellen. I'm going to take a closer look at what happened here. Slowing the playback and enlarging the image debunked the idea that the flash of light behind Eric was a reflection off an insect, as there is no evidence of anything solid within the shape. The playback also shows that no one in the room was moving during the phenomenon, so lens flares or shadows caused by the movement of other lights or reflections would not have occurred. We'll replay this sequence again. Notice the first orb dashes off, camera left, then the second appears immediately after, camera right. Could this be the same orb energy, or is one orb repelled by the other? It appeared that the entity communicating with us was responsive until we asked for the identity of Thomas Ince's killer.
You don't want to.
Then the communication through the board stalled and this strange light play occurred. Were these orb formations vanguards to a secret? It said that everyone aboard the yacht, Oneida, the night of Thomas's death, was sworn to secrecy by William Randolph Hearst. Is it possible that those involved would honor such an oath even beyond the grave?
So you know who murdered you, right? Yes or no? Were you the intended victim? So it was an accident. You have a certain code that you're following. There might have been a code when you were alive where you just didn't
Considering
talk
the
about
amount of
stuff.
suspicion and speculation that has loomed over the death of Thomas Ince for the past 90 years, this next response, which came through the board, really stunned me.
Thomas, does it matter to you who murdered you?
Says no.
Well, have you seen the person who killed you where you are now?
It would appear, for this entity anyway, that the matter of holding someone responsible for the death of Thomas Ince was closed. Other questions remain, however, and Thomas, if that is indeed who we were in contact with, seemed more than willing to continue our communication.
Thomas, was there a woman involved in this situation?
There's another tap in the other room.
Come closer.
There's lots of taps in
What was her name? Can you give us her initials? Is that C? C again? Is that CC for Charlie Chaplin? He wasn't a woman.
Or was he?
Or was he?
More surprises were in store as our seance continued, but unfortunately our time has run out for this episode. We hope you will join us for part 2 of the Culver Studios investigation. Until then, we'd like to leave you with this observation. The question for many paranormal researchers is not whether we can communicate with the dead. The question is whether the dead communicate back. Until an experiment can be developed that satisfies the scientific method, all we can do is gather evidence through whatever tools our technology affords us. From the evidence we gathered during our visit to the Culver Studios mansion, we must conclude that the property is a hotspot of paranormal activity, and, until proven otherwise, to our friends at the Culver Studios, we believe you have a ghost, and, most likely, many. From Beyond Normal, I'm Dana Amon. Thank you for watching.